So yes, I do have this literary model I made up of goth ecopoetics called the Necropastoral. And it's a model of literature that's arranged not like a pyramid or a ladder to heaven, but like a zone, a littoral, where a rust belt, shall we say, where processes such as decomposition, mutation, metastasization, contamination can all take place. And it's dehierarchized, it's anachronistic, it's non-binary, and it's defined, as you said, by strange meetings. And yes, that's a Wilfred Owen term. So yes, there's this sort of a World War I strata to the Necropastoral. You could say it's a cut-rate Elysian field for only the most dark and glamorous superstars such as ourselves. And I feel like the last few days have really entailed this kind of torrid zone, and I'm grateful to have been here in the glitter muck with all of you and all of us together for our strange meetings. So what I'm going to do tonight has two parts. First, I'm going to read some work, and then I am going to drop a whole lot of wisdom. Let me tell you, you're going to feel real wise when this is over. So the work I'm going to read is from an opera I wrote, Pistorius Rex. So maybe you know who Oscar Pistorius is. He's a Paralympian. He does not have legs below the knees, so he races. He's a sprinter. He races in real life. This is in real life. Oscar Pistorius of South Africa. And so he became one of the greatest athletes in the world, running on artificial legs that gave him cheetah legs, essentially. And so he was extremely successful as a sprinter, a very nice-looking blonde man. And then one night, one Valentine's night, he killed his girlfriend. In real life, Reva Steenkamp. This led to a trial, this led to a shockingly short sentence, this led to an appeal, this led to a longer sentence, etc. But the main part of the story that I was interested in was obviously Pistorius himself, and justice. Can there be any justice on this planet? I tend to think no, but maybe you have other ideas. I mean, maybe a different shape justice is what we're going for. So anyway, the phrase Pistorius Rex came into my head because, you know, Oedipus knows there's been the plague, there must have been a crime, but what is the crime? I don't know. Oedipus wants to find the real killers, right? But Pistorius, in my play, like knows there's been a crime, but cannot really process his own guilt. And so he's the king, and he is going through these crazy Matthew Barney art rituals, which are very sexy and distressed, but he's not actually getting towards justice. And so his dead girlfriend, named Europa, comes back to Earth to try to force justice to arrive. And the third part of the play is the chorus, of course, since this is so very classical and classically Greek. And the chorus, because it is so orthodox, is made of frogs. So that's all you need to know. The frogs, Pistorius, and Europa. Oh, and Pistorius has like a Veep, an adjutant, Creon, who does everything to take care of Pistorius's power. All right, so I'm just going to read you excerpts from the first act of this crazy libretto. And it starts at dawn, which was clever. It's like when the undergraduate starts with the alarm clock ringing. I'm doing it too. All right, so Pistorius Rex, these are the frogs. This is their dawn chorus, and then Europa kind of slinks in from outer space, basically, of course. Dawn chorus. The day is a bullseye, a burst bubo, a blacked out thing, a depression where the skin punch took its sample. It's round as a globe theater and deep as a poisoned well, an endocrine disruptor drilling down. This day's a smear on the shoulder. This day's a sigh, a dried out drainage ditch where amphibians kick their desiccated limbs. Frog tissue and gesture will be outlined on the blacktop by the sun's authority in an hour's time. A modern choreography. A fire pit, a failed vaccine, a kicked out window, a kicked in shin, a hot head that can't remove the ox mask or mask its bovine feelings. It's dawn in this locality. The malformed juvenile mink frog is hugging his 5 legs, and the malformed leopard frog dashes his extra eyes into the pavement because his head is too heavy, because it is too light and too hot in the light. A fire pit, a failed vaccine, a kicked out window, a kicked in shin, a hot head. The eye. wakes to its world wearing its makeup, still wearing its makeup, its worldly habit, its mantle of things, cindered materials pushed to the edges of the crash site, the world still wearing its wreckage like wedding jewelry, its rank indicia, its staved CD, its urgent care facility, its anchor desk, its insurance rep, its bottom line, its hairline, its red line, its debt, its Better Business Bureau, its coin, its mirror site, its server crash, its SUV, its diadem of debris.
Amen.
Here's Europa. Europa is disguised as a frog. A fire pit, a failed vaccine, a fire pit, a failed vaccine, a fire pit, a failed vaccine, a kicked out window, a quarantine, a kicked in shin, a staved in screen, the tire filled with gasoline, a kicked in shin, a failed vaccine, an antidote in glycerine, a hothead that cannot remove its ox mask or mask its bovine feelings. She looks up and her gaze lights Pistorius on his balcony. Pistorius, in white hot light, up on his balcony. He starts with a line that's actually from Erdogan of Turkey, if any of you following that whole story. Thebans, this morning you are safe in the hands of your police brothers. After your night of shifting in the messy square, Thebans, now rest in your river like a river of lymph, marl quadded, the water thick as sheets and as matted, manatees, river nymphs of the river lymph, a scourge of hyacinths, a vivid scum. Your river has an autoimmune disease. It produces slivery skin at an unnatural rate which piles up like shrouds. You can't move through this fabric. Too much traffic for this bandwidth. You can't ship. You can't offer same-day shipping. You can only shift in your sleep, Thebans. The docks are static, per embargo. The drones are up, they buzz. The doves are resting in their condos, Thebans. You wear a crown of white scars where your trick sank his teeth into your eyebrow. On you, it's cute. On you, it's haute couture. Your thicky laurels, your damaged script, Thebans, decadence, decedents. I'm out on my balcony with my shaving dish. It's silver and cold as an orb, an article of state. It treasures up a white froth, a foam, a milk, a slaver for smearing on my face, and dashing away with a crystal water from an ewer. I like that word. I've got all the best water. All cleanliness comes from me. I store it up and I charge it. I charge my smartphone in the sun. I am the Apple Store. I own it. Everything there is perfected. I touch the crystal screen with a stroke of my thumb. I make the pictures flutter off, pictures of your suffering. And then I turn it off. I have that luxury. I don't need a razor blade. My jaw is keen as a cleaner river than you will ever see. Instanter, it flashes as fits and befits a Rex, a Dukes, a Legio like me, a sprinter. So that's his speech. And then there's some frogs looking at him. There's Pistorius at his toilet. Wag! There's a room I'd be afraid to enter, a position I'd be afraid to assume, a sight I'd hate to bite, an Isle of Wight. That chamber, that chanker, that ringtone, that cold throne, that water closet, that pre-do. It's a little too ventilated, if you know what I mean. A little too pranked with holes. A girl can't breathe. Well, not anymore. Well, neither can he. You'll observe he spends his free time on plein air. He's afraid of small spaces, rustling noises and sliding doors. Because of that night he blew the roof off, and the moon was a puddle of nightgown. He danced the moon down to the floor. So then, Europa and the frogs sing a little duet, of course. And then the adjutant shows up, and Europa figures out he's there and sort of tries to win him over to to her side. All right, so here's the little song with Europa and the frogs. Europa first here, frogs there. The Greeks contend, the dead don't want revenge. It's a lie, whoever said that was alive. The Greeks contend, a Lethe drip can make all memory of earthly crime pass from the mind. I'm not that refined. I'm a little more French. Retina comes from rete a net. So the murder victim's eye holds the image of her murderer deep inside. Just look inside mine. This is unison, obviously. And you'll see who murdered me. Hello, I'm Crayon. I am assistant to the king. You may know me from his primetime State of the Addresses. I sit just behind the throne, in my own throne. I appear to be sitting on his shoulder thanks to perspective, scale, and light. Are you his devil or his better angel then, says Europa. I'm no angel, but I like to think King Oscar has no devil side. You would like to think that, but a coin that has only one side is either a false one or a two-headed coin, which is either a freak or a fraud. Anyhow, in the case of your king, his record contradicts you. My lady is a learned woman, you argue prettily. That's right, though my little teeth do have a bite. Like the lock on a yuppie's briefcase, I've learned a lot over the last 2 months. You might say I've come a long way. You might say I've earned my bachelor's degree. Oh, you might say I'm ABD. And she pulls her I know it's a college town joke. And then she pulls her frog mask out and he's like, Europa! Crayon, Europa! Crayon, but how? I arranged your sea burial. I set you on the back of the white bull myself and cast you into the marbled sea, and your mangled self scattered like golden credit card broadcasting its starry ones and O's. And then I sacrificed the bull on an altar of cedars. It cost a pretty penny. The white bull, the gold paint, the aromatics, plus the simulcast, the inner minor money for Oscar and me. I'm staggered, I'm bankrupt, it beggars me. And she says, well, I'm here, yada yada, seeking justice. And then, let's see, then Pistorius comes on again, and she says, of course, but soft, he takes to the balcony again. I didn't have a lot of ideas once I got started in terms of stagecraft. I was focused on the words, so he's back on the balcony. Would that I were a glove upon that neck, she says. In time enough I'll tan his hide and make myself a gauntlet whereon my hawk can ride. And here's Pistorius. Thebans, I have sent my advisors away because I wish to speak to you from my heart. Its precincts emptied of police. Someone has stolen my watch. Time is building up in my joints. I'm wound so tight I might spasm off the gold plate of the planet and into the void. In preparation for this date, I have applied to myself a difficult regime of rib spreaders and jumper cables, cable sweaters and salt scrubs, acid peels and stable hosing, cerebral shocks. Yesterday I dashed around our city 7 times bearing an armload of gold maces from the royal treasury. I sweat out every possible toxin until the sun sank in defeat, until the sun slank away in her cheap red garment, returned to her red light district to split her legs. Then I came home and took several showers. Night is difficult for me. The sun leaves. She only likes me in the day. And now it's dawn. It's still dawn. Now it's dawn. The sun's back in her lovely soft attire. Fate has such a grasping hand, always grabbing at the steering wheel, always slurping at the cup, always trashing the bridal suite, the marble bathroom, the gated community, the oaken door, the sancta sanctorum, the cranium closed around the cerebellum, that long tissue, pleated pretty as you like. But I digress. But I speed ahead. For first I swam, for second I jumped hurdles, for third I shot and dashed, for fourth I shot a bullet through the sunroof to attract the sun's attention, for fifth I drove around with a hole in the skull of my car, for sixth the sun nodded her consent, for seventh the sun let me wear her head on my head, my crown, my heavy laurels. Then I got out and ran around the track. Like a perfect golden toy, I ran around the track. I lapped the sun lapped me up, that lioness. For my sport legs are based on cheetah treads, and the rest of that day she loved me, motherly bosom and cousinly pussy. But at night, where was that slattern sun? That's the unlikable Pistorius. And now, 2 more things from here. So here's the frogs again. They're the chorus after all, so they get a lot of lines. Here we go. A permanent Don would stay just as his hand. A permanent girl, whipping her hair back and forth, stained with brain matter. Like a gift in the sky, its lossless compression, its stuttering cosmos, its coma of comets, its stabat mater, its knot of star matter will freeze the axe handle and arrest the plot and ampersand the plot. But why? But why? But why would the Dawn? But why would the Dawn love Pistorius? Is it because his hair is gold? Is it the way he wears fame as lightly as a cat wears fur and wields fame as heavily as a mace? And is it because he runs like a woman or a cat on blades? Is it because his mother dipped him all the way down in the Styx and hacked away at his Achilles tendons and rebuilt him for her ends? Was it for this? Dawn is a woman with no solidarity. She is always alone in the sky. She takes her time at her toilet. She takes all the time. She tops all the clocks on the starter's block. She fires her starter's pistol and fills the sky with its starry report and admires her own luster, her diadem of brain matter, seed-pearled and seed-funded, and fascinates herself and blocks justice's arrival. What gold balls! What a gold medallion! How halcyon! What a nose job! What a soi-disant Silicon Valley! What a gold bustier Madonna Mank! What a golden charger! What an instrument of murder! What a blunt instrument! What a hollow core bullet! What a cheap gizmo! What a brain! What a chariot on which the sun rides wild! What a seizure! What a seizure! What a foreclosure! What relief from time's predatory loan! What movement of event from escrow! All the goods out on the lawn! What a scorcher! What a hacked account! What a padlock! What a safecrackers tunnel up in their heist to the height of munificence, the heaven's gold-stopped vault, shower of heart-scorching pissy mitzvah, oveny chokehold, gold-stopped, gold-franked, gold-locked, gold-shot, gold-bolt, gold inlaid, gold stuffed, shunted, stunted, gold straights, gold's traits, everything stilled and strangled, endless conversation with the sun, channels and runoffs, stitches and canal banks, tabloids and bank statements, and stopped up back-channeled charnel house drains, and floodlit garden walls where frogs sit on their haunches as on gold-plated toilets or certificates of patent and scream like blondes. And finally, after a lot of this, Europa addresses the frogs. Well, first she sings a little duet, which I think is kind of fun, so I'll sing this real quick, and then the last thing. So this is the second to last thing. Creon and Europa try to sing a duet. It goes like this. Creon: I myself arrived with the ambulance. I myself put you in the sack and threw you in the sea like a kitten and came back to wipe up the mess. It was my mission to put Oscar to bed and drive in the hypodermic and draw him close like a curtain and then with a couple of uppers to open him up like day. And when he wanted to suffer, I put 2,000 frogs down a mine shaft and built him a golden cage. Hand in glove, I played the lizard sycophant for love. Second in command, the man I love. I iron his cravat, I wipe his sweat, I blot his spit, I catch his vomit, and when he cries his eyes out, I fix them in place with a pin. Europa. Hand in glove, some things you can't tidy up, Mr. Cleanly Buttercup. Smooth of cheek and soft of step, but life is not a minuet. I was not some boutonniere to poke through Oscar's button eye, to ride and dry in the sun and die. I draw him up like curtains, I open him up like day, and when he wants to suffer, I put him in the cage. I drank up the horizon's lie. I wanted other things from life. I signed along the dotted line. I put my hand into the glove and buttoned up. And now this is the last thing. So this is Europa, sort of to the audience and to the frogs. I have a secret name, a Europa. A moon, but not your moon. also known as euterpe, urethra, uterus, luxuria, ulteria, but mostly as Europa because I'm dead and deadly white. I rode off on a bull and was toted west over the ocean, ne'er to arrive, but always ride shotgun or bitch in transit, as befits a pitiable moon. But now I'm back in my silver shoon, the goddess of extremities, Stella Maris, extreme cinema, what winds up on the winding sheet, the cutting room floor, extremophiles, you little scum clots who live in nitro vents and the lips of volcanoes and acid ponds, you heaps of lipids, frogs, I signal to you indestructibles, you incorruptibles, you incredibles, for you, I drag the river in with my negligee, for you, I pull the ocean in my wake. I've exited from orbit. I'm dressed in negative light. I'm heavier than any blonde you could dream up. I'm like a floater in the eye, an occlusion in your oculus, the maculus where you kiss the grave, where you degenerate, hold your stigma up. I spec the contact lens of the firmament. Blink, blink, I disappear, and now blink, I appear again. Low-slung spangle, galaxy's garter, a tangle of hair which can be airbrushed out in a wink only to return and ride the sly thigh to the vanishing point. I disturb the atmosphere. Now Earth is huddled in my troposphere under my nightgown skirts. A dead center, a raisin in the sun shot full of lead like this. I'm the moon, Europa. Queen of frogs. I breathe through my skin. I breathe through my eyes, my hectic hair, haptic as a snake, a smartphone, or a pack of frogs reaching their frog legs to the moon. I breathe through you. You are sure to join my mission. Frogs come from the moon. Moon calves come from the moon. And tides and cheese and manatees and Ambien and me. I was a budding star in a bikini, a survivor on Survivor Island, modeling for Lads Mag, studying for my law degree, till the sun chopped down my cherry tree and made a moon pie out of me, turned my mons pubis into a mountain of the moon, my cunt to a crater, and I refuse the sun's blandishments. I refuse to revolve, forgive, or evolute. I am Europa. Back from the solar system, I plummet like an anchor of sang-froid. I wear an ice ball for an evening gown, and I bear an iron core. So that's the first act of the story. So now I'm going to try to explain myself. If this happens. Do I need to do something?
No, you're fine. I just have to get the right angle for this thing to listen to me. Here, I'll be right back.
Oh, right.
This thing doesn't like to communicate.
No, it's not my. It's here.
Okay.
There.
Are we no longer
Oh,
standby?
there
we are.
All right, it's happening. All right, we'll see if this works. So hello again. I'm now done with Pistorius. Woo! And I'm going to try to give a talk. We'll see what happens. Called Dark Sonics. And the subtitle Garbage and Ghost comes from the Korean poet Kim Hee-soon, and I'll talk more about her later. Okay, so about 6 years ago, I began to lose my hearing. When someone would talk at a certain pitch and volume, I would lose the words. That is, my brain could usually hear the sound, but could no longer break the sound into words, and at certain pitches and volumes, I couldn't hear the sound at all. So I visited an audiologist in South Bend, Indiana. She put me in a little booth, like a DJ's, foam soundproofing, I guess that's not really like a DJ's, but imagine, foam soundproofing and exposed wiring, cosmic uterine darkness, utterly analog. The audiologist sat muttering in her Empyrean, her lit booth, and I, like a Sybil, sat on a tripod in my darkness. Why did it need to be so dark? Cosmic, uterine. Locked away from the light wash of the Milky Way, that maternal gush, sound became a when. When there was a sound, I could not hear it. And when there were words below my hearing, they sometimes transmitted to my brain without me actually experiencing them audially. So like theater, the word theater would occur to me, but I couldn't actually hear it. It just occurred. It was an event, a when, a non-event, a non-sound, theater. And it occurred, theater, and I replied, theater. So this is when I experienced a breakage between biological hearing and sound. And when I experienced that break, I became a devotee of sound, its inscrutable and occult arrivals. Sound is an event, a when. Its frequency is made of repetitions. Sound it again. Sound it again and again. Sound like tide arriving at a black place. Sound like waves. It breaks so it can return again. Okay, there we go. So, Korean poet Kim Il-sung speaks of a figure from Korean myth called Princess Abandoned. It's usually called Bari, B-A-R-I. I'll stand over here. Bari or Bari Degi. And so the deal with Bari is she is like a daughter, a royal daughter, but she's sort of thrown out of the household. In some versions, she's going to get a remedy for her father, the king. So she goes to the underworld to get this remedy. And this journey ends up being really instrumental for her. And she finds that she becomes this kind of medium figure. She goes into the dark places. She can hear the abandoned. So she's the abandoned. She's hearing the abandoned. And she is the figure for Kim Il-sung of the female poet, Bari. And Kim Il-sung in this essay, Garbage and Ghost, which has an uncredited translator, otherwise I would provide the credit, says, Bari introduces a community of parting that is repeated in each moment. So, you can go away. You can go away. Go away further. Go a little more away. Oh, there it is. So, in darkness, that's where you left me. In obscurity, in Indiana, an obscure location. Well, more obscure than here, actually. A place of damage. I stopped being a devotee of like the retinal model of art or the prizing of sight or vision, and instead seated on my tripod like the oracles of Delphi, the Pythian oracles, the girls who sat above a rotting python. I became mediumistic. I was a designee. I experienced idiopathic hearing loss, yes, but I also experienced occult hearing. Darkling, I listened. I was occulted in mine own inner ear, down a mine shaft, in mine own locked vault, in that clinic's womb, when sound arrived. Incipit, ab ovo, over and over. Unbeknownst, anti-narrative, irrational, doubling, and always arriving sound. Sound resounds. Illicit sounds. It elicits replies. It elicits illicit replies. Like, for example, tell me, where is fancy bread? Or in the heart, or in the head? How begot, how nourished? Reply, reply. Reply, reply. Reply, 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 reply. It is engendered in the eye, with gazing fed, and fancy dies in the cradle where it lies. So let us all ring fancy's knell. I'll begin it. Ding dong bell. All? So Shakespearean. So the birth becomes a beer. The transfiguration happens sonically. The famous ode to vision. So this is like an ode to vision at the beginning, right? But then it's transformed through voicing, through singing, to and all that starts ringing. It's like a cannon by the end. So it's like vision is turned to sound, right? It's ringing, it's oaring, or it goes or, all along the waterways of the underworld's famous rivers, the ringing of the voices which imitate a bell. Fancy, fancy death. It arrives and arrives. And by the way, reply is from Latin replicare, to replicate. To reply, to reply, to reply, to reply, to make more of, to replicate. So this song, to me, introduces an interval that literally stops the show, because it's kind of a round. It can be sung forever, but it exacts a price. It drives up the price, a battalion exorbitance. It's like the radio that told me about the death of Billy the Kid, Jack Spicer. The radio delivers news of death, like a baby delivered again and again and foundering to no life, a once-in-a-lifetime event which is somehow repeated but never completed. Reply, reply, arrives and never abides, but it's impossible to repeat an ultimate, or it should be. Reply, reply, it makes a beat that can't be survived. Maybe that's the wolf tone. It's called the sublime. I'll begin it. Reply, reply. A birth arrives as a death arrives over the radio, repeats, beats, reverses, is re-endured, reversed again, in a blackened zone, a faked-out, blacked-out, spectacular frontier in which the conventional prerogatives of biological and patriarchal life are deranged. Let's go away. Now you. More Kim Il-sung. She says, the woman wanders the world of death. The woman dies and marries. The woman dies and gives birth. And by the woman, she means the poet. And she doesn't necessarily mean a biological woman. She believes in the feminine, which means like a purposeful giving off of patriarchal power and a renouncing of patriarchal power. So it's a non-exclusive definition of woman, but it is woman. So by the woman, she means the poet, and by the poet, she means the abandoned, princess abandoned, the Bari or Baridegi, which I've described to you already, the figure of Korean myth, and anti-Cordelia, who having gone to hell to gain a remedy of for her father, she comes back up with a remedy, and he says, okay, you can have some of the kingdom now, and she says no. She rejects filial compassion and the inheritance plot, and she instead leaves again to go back to the black zone. She departs, she resubmerges, she returns to plumb and replumb the region of death, like an occult sonogram of the occult regions. And she doesn't take up a permanent address. This is an important part of Kim Il-sung's argument. And Kim Il-sung is like a master Korean poet, so you should check out. So like a sound wave, the Baridegi or the Bari moves, the princess abandoned. She becomes a wen, a frequency. And this painful movement allows her to receive and to transmit and to amplify the sound of the abandoned. And the abandoned are the dead, the extinguished, the silenced, the wretched of the earth, who in their radical abandonment experience an elasticized version of death, time, and everything else. Okay, so top quote, Kim Il-sung again. Because the baby is banished, it comes to possess a bare face that cannot be destroyed by any force of nature or any power. This model of death thereby erases the capital of the individual life as a property of the individual, as the property of the individual, an individual life that careens from birth to death like an arrow, or even the soul's journey, learning and improving as it endures its paternalistic curriculum. This model of death inverts earthly power, and yet it redefines power. It redistributes it to the clump body, the abandoned, the garbage. Bari, basura. Kim Il-sung. Get out of the way. Garbage is merely held together in one clump, like refugees in a truck. And she's obviously on the side of the refugees. This is like an exercise in kind of validating the most perjurized terms. So garbage is merely held together in one clump, like refugees in a truck, and has no individuality. It is ragged and explicit. It has no face or name. The act of discarding it or burning it does not agitate ethical sensibilities. It's no one's face. It does not even have a hole through which to breathe. So the princess abandoned, the Bari joins the abandoned and becomes the poet of garbage. And in a famous poem of Kim Il-sung's reads, all the garbage of the world unite. So, one year ago, my baby died, and she had problems with her lungs when she was born. She could not even squeak or achoo. She lasted 13 lucky days. The only way to live with her now is to repeat those 13 days. We sang to her and we sang into her. And now those songs come back like earworms and make a grave of the brain, a continuous black space that goes all the way to hell. And she's been transfigured to a sound. Reply, reply. Kim Il-sung, because the baby has been banished, it comes to possess a bare face that cannot be destroyed by any force of nature or any power. The earworms arrive, and also language that I've never sounded. I had this phrase in my head, I had this voice in my head, and I was like, where did I hear that? And then I realized I had never heard it. I had seen it on the internet and made it into sound in my head. So again, another like non-audially experienced sound. And that very important piece of literature was this. Now, I don't know if you guys remember the cake fail meme of a few years ago, but when you undergo a trauma, the stuff your brain like dishes up to you is like very undignified. It's not like you're walking around reciting Lycidas to yourself, all right? Instead, I have this piece of language underneath that. I mean, my baby is literally buried, and instead of thinking like noble mourning hymns, I just went around saying to myself, underneath that, like for a year. Underneath that. As a cake meme says, an error of description. So you remember the deal is like, the idea here is somebody has called the supermarket and said, this is what I want on the cake. I want you to write, best wishes Suzanne, and underneath that, write, we will miss you. However, because the ear is an amazing organ of enlightenment, this cake resulted. And this is the cake that launched 1,000 memes. So it's the Helen of Troy of cake fails. Underneath that. And for whatever reason, in the biggest crisis of my life, the only phrase that came to me, it was not like some passage from the Bible, was, but underneath that. So underneath that, we will miss you. And the funny thing is, like, we will miss you, I forgot that part. I just remembered underneath that, and it was only when I put this presentation together, I realized that what my brain was really trying to say, right? It's like, we will miss you. But like, I couldn't even say that. So I could just say the stupid fucking meme underneath that, again and again, in my own head, to myself. Underneath that, we will miss you. Reply, reply. The loss of my daughter further abandoned me to the black region of occult hearing. So now I'm disoriented, I'm abandoned, I close my eyes, I return to the black booth, and I'm never at rest. I go staggering, I cannot coordinate along Descartes axes like a good Western capitalist. I just can't tell the difference anymore. Dead, alive, X, Y, myself, others, a map of the property, a rational map. Like Schrodinger's cat, I'm alive and dead, and I have tinnitus, so it sounds and sounds and sounds in my head, toned and intoned, tuned and entombed. I walk in hell like Kim Il-sung or like Blake in the blackness. I hear so many sounds, the voices of the abandoned, and that was my practice. Now I voice those sounds into audibility, and I think that's where my poetry comes from. But I never actually hear the sound of my baby because she never made a sound. She couldn't make a sound. She had diaphragm problem. But when she was dying, she made the sweetest little laugh. Reply, reply. And I should stress here, I think it's time to reveal something else about myself while I have the mic. That I arrived at my dead ear. So, the audiologist is like, yeah, you have hearing loss. Like, what did you do? You lost your hearing. What have you been listening to? And I thought about it. And I kind of knew what it was. Oh, he doesn't want to sing, but you know what he sounds like, right? He's not singing for me today, so I'll do it. Married. Married. Yeah, 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 yeah. Should we do it again? Okay. Let's do it one more time. Here we go. I'll see if I can sing it for him. He's married, right? Married. Married. That's better. So you have the song in your head now, exactly like my broken ears work, right? But so my hearing has failed at exactly the frequency of this man saying married, buried, and so I always have that in my head. Married, buried, married, buried. Tell me, where is fancy bread? Married, buried, and underneath that, the missing line. I'm not there yet. So through repetition, damage turned my hearing to a non-hearing, but also to a hyper-hearing of non-sound. Reply, reply. Listening to old Kurt, the hairs of my inner ear all laid down and surrendered. I was like, I just want to hear that forever. I'll hear nothing else, and that's what happened. It made an underground region where occult sound could resound, could echo, the coexistence of damage and hearing, the comorbidity as an uncanny co-vitality. It's diagnosed. Okay, so it's diagnosed in the poetry of Jack Spicer. So my audiologist didn't have an explanation, but Jack Spicer did. Okay, so this is his poem, The Sporting Life. The trouble with comparing a poet with a radio is that radios don't develop scar tissue. The tubes burn out, or with a transistor, which most those are, the battery or diagram burns out, replaceable but not replaceable, not like that punch-drunk fighter at a bar. The poet takes too many messages. The right to the ear that floored him in New Jersey, the right to say that he stood 6 rounds with a champion. Then they sell beer or go on sporting commissions, or if the scar tissue is too heavy, demonstrate in a bar where the invisible champions might not have hit him. Too many of them. The poet is a radio. The poet is a liar. The poet is a counterpunching radio. And those messages, God would not damn them, do not even know they're champions. So the damage to the ear the poet endures by too many messages described in the first 3 stanzas. The knocked out fighter, as we know, has had his bell rung. We know that from Looney Tunes. But by the 4th stanza, we feel the punches themselves. The poet is a radio. The poet is a liar. The poet is a counterpunching radio. The waves of sound of arrival beat and beat in short phrases. The phrases contradict themselves, distorting each other's sense, creating a zone of paradox, arriving and arriving again. The fitfulness of the stanza is sound beating against sound, something breaking through the skull of the poet again and again. Reply, reply. So this is the last part. So part 2, anagram, has an epigram, a chew, Sylvia Plath. So let's review. Let's step away from me and back to poetry. I did all that. Princess Abandoned, you've got that, right? Some hearing is sub or ultrasonic, beyond the range of normal hearing. It makes a map of the baby in the womb, or in my case, in the grave, where it's bred and where it lies underneath that, like waves that reached me in the audiologist booth. Sound arrives, but it cannot be biologically heard. It is an occult sound, yet its transfer makes a membrane of the poet's body, makes a hole in the poet's body, and escapes again as sound. Reply, reply. It makes the poet a transducer. It opens up strange, unbearable intervals. It induces a poet to make a sonography of hell, and this sonography may be a song, or it may be transcribed. So my last example is a transcription. It's a triple transcription. And it is the hexen text of Unica Zorn. So hexen text, like a witch text, right? So Unica Zorn, as we've already talked about her today, among many other amazing things she did was anagram poems. And so she has a book of these called the hexen text, which have sketches like this, and then the anagram next to it. So for me, they seem to be transcriptions of each other. These pictures are really worth checking out, and they're on the Yale Beinecke Library website, so you can check that out when you're going to bed tonight. So let's just look at a quick run of these anagrams, and then I'll close. So here's the German, and I asked my friend Jace to read the German for us, so please project, my friend Jace.
Wir lieben den Tod.
No, wait, that's not going to do it. Hold on.
Wir lieben den Tod. Brot windet den Leib, Brot wende in Leid, endet Not. Bald wird Leben. Wir den Tod weben dein Lot, der in Erde wild boten. Wir lieben den Tod.
All right, so you grasp that, right? How that's working anagrammatically. So 2 translations for you. Because translations really signal to my poetics. I think translation already makes one of these black zones that's black but full, black but antic. So here's Google's translation, very important translator. We love death. Red wind the body, bread turning grief, end. No. Bale becomes life. We, your death, weave your lot to you in earth. Wild messengers. We love death. I love this translation. The wild messengers remind me of the people who call and order the cake, you know, and then the poet who's been punched in the ear makes the cake underneath that, right? And it's a really fucking good cake. All right, so then I asked an actual poet to do a translation for me. This poet is Sade Lene. She published a book on Sade Murphy, and they have changed their name to Lene. So Sade Lene, this is their translation, which I think is beautiful. We harbor the demise. Red wreathes the womb, turning bread into bale, bulking at need, hatchet handles being. We, your death, weave your lot into the earth. Feral heralds, we harbor the demise. And I think these translations are all kind of anagrams of each other, too. And I have a quote here by Hans Bellmer that I'm not going to read, but it's a really good quote. And although that's like a problematic relationship, she really valued that relationship and thought they were like cousins in certain ways, so I'm not going to judge that. One more thing I want to read you, and then I'll close. So I wanted another example. All right, occult transcription. So the reason I think of anagrams as having to do with transcription, even though they obviously have to do with inscription, is because when you read the anagram, you have this experience of the sound bouncing back and forth across each line. And then when you add the translations and you layer the translations, all of a sudden you have all of these tones bouncing back and forth against each other, and then you have the crazy picture, which is so amazing and wonderful. So that's why I'm introducing this transcription as a kind of sonogram, even, and because as I've established again, like I'm talking about sound, I'm not necessarily talking about biological sound, for obvious reasons. Okay, so I think we grasped that, and so on to to close. So just to briefly just touch on the political possibility of that, Dolores Durantes, the great Mexican poet, has a book called Estilo, in which the women who have been killed in drug violence along the US-Mexico border reanimate as a choral we and utter these amazing poems, and you can read most of them online. And I think this is an example of how this choral voice, just as the vibration of returning sound can tear a person apart, I went off on Orpheus for a while. You know, Orpheus, Ian Curtis, it's like anagrams. So sound can trouble a border, and I feel like that these women are reanimated. They're like vibrated back into animation and come back across the border. They exterminate. They come back from the terminus to wield a kind of sonic power, and these poems are incredibly powerful. And so to voice the Spanish for me, my friend Herman is going to read the Spanish. So there you go.
This is so good. Territorio sin puerto, tierra sin paradero, cuerpo de corazón vacío. Lugar desangrado, nosotras todas tuyas corriendo. Todas corriendo para entrar en ti. Somos un mar de nenas desnudas, felices en medio de los alaridos. Llegamos a tu pecho, armadas con máscaras de niña y lenguas de animal. Casi te mueres. Más que este territorio de la incertidumbre, somos tuyas, para tu voluntad y queremos lo nuestro. Vamos avanzando, acomodándonos ahí, calentando ahí. Corremos como corren la sangre y las loberías de miedo. Entramos igual que la frescura. Nos colocamos ordenadamente como militares o joyas.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's probably typos in there, so that was very heroic. Thank you very much. And now the English. So this is translated by Jen Hofer, who's a really important translator, a member of the Antennae Collective. They do really interesting work with social justice. They translate at courthouses and also literary translations and all other kinds of amazing things. So this is Durantes as translated by Jen Hofer. Territory with no harbor. So there's that same language from the Zorn. So I really feel like these spells are spelling and respelling themselves in all of the homophonic senses of that term. Territory with no harbor, land with no stopping place, body with empty heart, place drained of blood, we are all yours running, all running to enter you. We are a sea of naked girls, happy in the midst of the howling. We arrive at your chest, armed with girl masks and animal tongues. You nearly die. More than this territory of uncertainty, we are yours. For your will, and we want what belongs to us. There's fragments, that's not my fault. We're moving along, arranging ourselves there, heating it up there. We run like blood runs, and the lobelias of fear. We enter like cool air. We place ourselves tidily, like soldiers or jewels. So one interesting thing about this translation is obviously the you in English, it can be plural, it's much broader. And so when it comes into English, the kind of addressing of guilt and the direction of the vengeance, which is ambiguous because the vengeance is like we are yours, like there's a commitment there too. But the you broadens. There can be many yous who are responsible for the death of these women and who are haunted by these women. It broadens beyond the intimate singular you of the Spanish. And I think that's like another occult thing that translation can do, is like bring out a real meaning and a real force in addition to obviously the forcefulness of that poem. Okay, so the girls of this I swear this is the last page. The dead girls of this poem push back across the terminal border, and they open up an impossible space in which they address and haunt the you. The impossible becomes a zone of possibility, an arrival and re-arrival, an extermination signaled by the howling. Written over in English, the zone becomes a further uncanny, it becomes doubled. The ringing in the wood multiplies as the you becomes unknown. And the addressing of the guilt is general. The you is potentially both singular and plural, and the zone, this territory of uncertainty, spreads, ripping through the body of the you, insisting on arrival. we arrive at your chest. It's striking, pun intended, how the rings go forth from the various act strikes of this poem, and that they begin to overlap, to tremble, to treble. The choral speakers of this poem anagrammatize the feral heralds of Una Kazern's anagram in Sade Lanane's rearranging hand. It's this crossing and recrossing of the border, the sending across and back of waves of sound that allow this occult and political arrival and suspension to happen. These rehearsals and delays to entail a pluraling of the body, an othering of time, and a differenting of space. And now a little prose poem for you, a little song. So this space resounds with axe rings. It's married, it's buried, it's full of wild heralds. It has a territory with no harbor, land with no stopping place, body with empty heart, place drained of blood. We are all yours running. Reply, reply. Swing low, Zydeco. We harbor your demise. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Reply, reply. And one last thing to show you. So there's Kurt. That's our baby Kurt. That's his baby Francis Bean. That's an amazing Oriental rug, quote unquote Oriental. And here is the collage, the very collage that we've been looking at as the background of my very own presentation, which is also the back cover art to In Utero, this album. Just to bring all this, he's an important boy mother for me. We can talk about that over drinks. And now for the very last part of this stunt. And this is supposed to be silent, so do not adjust your sets. Oh, it's not the sound, thank you. tossing us around from the grave. He's a baby tyrant. Oh man, he works for it. He worked for the money. He worked for it. He did not die in vain. All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you and good night. Buy drinks. Tip your bartender.